So, all right, now let's talk about Trump. Trump going on Andrew Schultz's podcast. Like, before we even get to the clips, let me just talk to you about that, right? Like,
okay, tell me about that.
Like, I have so many thoughts on it. Like, well, what are we doing here?
It's very clear what we're doing. He has a strategy to go on these podcasts because he thinks he can, Aiden Ross and all these other people, because he thinks he can reach out to young men. And there's a gender gap. Young men overall still voting by some margin for Kamala Harris. But there has been a shift among young men in particular towards Trump, and he thinks that this is the way to reach them. And, maybe he's right.
Okay, but if you're Andrew Schultz, do you take that interview?
It's a tough one. That's a really tough one.
Because you run the risk of people being like, why are you propping up this dude who tried to overthrow the last election? He's clearly an authoritarian, and you're going to, sit around and giggle with him?
Yeah, well, even I saw the Caller Daddy lady, Alex Cooper, I think is her name. She had some backlash from her audience of being
for having Kamala on,
this is not what this podcast is supposed to be. You're just turned into like an infomercial, paid propaganda for the Democrats.
Right.
So yeah, it's a risk. I mean, I think overall, from the clips that I've seen come out, I think he handled it like the best way that you could, which is he's not a journalist. He's not gonna ask hard-hitting follow-ups, whatever. But to just sort of laugh at Trump and mock him to his face, I think is kind of.
But those are only little moments here and there. Like, I was actually watching a little bit of it before I came in here. I watched it from the beginning. So far, I'm only 15 or 20 minutes in, but. No, the vibe more so is he's one of the boys, right? And we're giggling and we're laughing and we're telling jokes and, oh, look, he's humanized. And it's like, do you really want to do that? Maybe it is incumbent on you to be a journalist or a reporter in that scenario. Maybe it is incumbent upon you to know that he increased drone strikes 432%. And civilian deaths in Afghanistan went up 330% under his watch. Maybe it is incumbent upon you to know that he illegally assassinated General Soleimani, and that led to retaliatory strikes from Shia militias against our troops, right? Maybe it is incumbent upon you to know that he gave the Golan Heights and said this is now Israel's, even though it's Syrian territory. He did the Abraham Accords, which helped lead to October 7th. These are, and I'm just giving a couple examples here, but I don't know. It just seems to me very irresponsible to do it. But of course, he'll fall back on it's my right to do it. Of course, yeah, I'm not arguing you don't have the right to talk to him if you want to talk to him. The question is, should you do that? And for all my criticisms of Rogan was like, am I really the one who should be doing this?
Yeah.
Do I have the requisite knowledge to sit across from somebody who was the most powerful man in the world and is trying to be the most powerful man again? So anyway, from Andrew Schultz's perspective, not sure it was the greatest idea. And by the same token, the Caller Daddy woman sitting there playing patty cakes with Kamala Harris, I feel the same way. If you're sitting across from Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or Donald Trump and you don't mention Gaza and the genocide that we're arming and funding and the fact that all of these people support it, you're sort of a ridiculous person, right? So that's what I would say on that front. Now, from Trump's perspective, him coming on, what do you think of that? Do you think it's is it actually smart politics, or is he wasting his time because the 18-year-old boys who are listening to Schultz are going to go to the club tonight and they're not going to fucking go vote?
They're probably not going to go vote. Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is I don't think that any of this matters. When I look at these incredibly consequential things that have happened in, since Kamala rose to basically where she is in the polls, and the polls are just nope, we're just going to stay right here.
Yeah.
So, in defense of Andrew Schultz or Caller Daddy lady, I don't know that any of these things are really that make or break for either of these candidates. But you bring up an interesting electoral point, which is that historically, it's usually been Democrats that have had to rely on less frequent voters,
young people, for
their coalition. And now the polls show that actually, when you look just at the most committed voters, Kamala has the lead. And when you look at the less frequent voters, Trump actually has the lead. And I think part of that less frequent voter coalition would be whatever young men are now coming over to his side. So, I don't know that it would be the greatest political strategy to rely on them, but that's kind of where he is. He kind of needs to speak to them, get them engaged. And it's not just this podcast. He has leaned more into the podcast world than the Harris campaign has.
I know, he goes on, no disrespect to Andrew Schultz, because his podcast is genuinely popular, but Trump has gone on some of the dopiest fucking podcasts in the world where they jack him off the entire time. What's his face? what is it, Jeffrey Ballsacks, and then the other guy. Like, he goes on these, like, weird tech bro podcasts, the Chamath Politipitaya, whatever his name is.
Well, those guys are his donors, so.
They're his donors, and also they're fucking, like, they're so obnoxious. They're so dumb, and they think they're so smart.
The all in?
That's one of them. I don't know which one that is.
That's the one with Chamath Palihapitiya and David Sachs and those guys. That's the All In podcast, and they're like all donors. These people are a joke.
I remember that Ballsacks guy gave a speech at the RNC, and it was just dead air.
Who is the Ballsacks guy?
Jeffrey Sachs, right? Am I thinking of somebody else?
Yeah, you're thinking of somebody else.
What's the dude I'm thinking of? Like, I know you got his face in it. He's like sort of a pale guy, pasty.
Do you try David Sachs?
Big pro-Israel.
David Sachs. That's who you're talking about.
Yeah, the Ballsacks guy. I call him Ballsacks.
I did not know you had this nickname for him, baby.
Well, he gave a speech at the RNC, right? That's the same one that we're talking about?
I think so.
Well, anyway, the really pale guy who's like super pro-Israel and obsessed with the issue of Ukraine, he gave a speech at the RNC.
David
he was
Sachs,
like,
that's who you're talking about.
He was like going deep on like NATO history, and everybody was looking at him like shut the fuck. I don't know if he got a single like applause line in the whole shit.
He's one of the ones too that they pulled clips of that podcast right after January 6th, and they were all like, "This motherfucker is unfit for office. He should never be back in. He needs to be put in prison." And now they're like, "Yay, Trump! Will you take our money and like do whatever we want you to do?" Anyway, it's gross. But so anyway, Trump has had more of that podcast strategy than Kamala has, trying to reach these like less engaged voters. And
it's too online. I think it's too online, personally.
I think it's probably too. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it really works.
All right. Well, now let's go ahead and take a look at the first clip we have here of Schultz and Trump.
The term MAGA, Make America Great Again. I'm going to make this country great again. It's not a great country right now. It's loaded up.
It's always a great country. It's a great country.
See, that's
always a great country.
Okay, but I say it has the potential, and it was a great country. I think now there's so much hatred and there's so much dissension. I think when you have people that can't walk down Fifth Avenue, when you have people that can't walk down a street, it ceases to be.
We can always be better. We can always be better.
Yeah, but you can't blindfold yourself to say.
No, I'm honest about it. But to me, I'm really proud of America because I think that I think I can be the best version of myself here. You know, I think that Donald Trump can only happen in America. Your life, what has happened to you, this is an American story.
But that proves Trump's point, though. That like we're not in a good place right now. Schultz is like, Donald Trump could only happen here in America. Yeah, that's bad. I don't want that.
True.
So Trump's actually right about that.
True. Yeah, I mean, there were a couple moments where, like, Trump called himself a basically truthful person.
I saw that. Yeah,
and Schultz just
basically truthful person, and he
Schultz
starts
laughing at him. And that was funny because Ella, our teenage daughter, she was like, "There's a thing on TikTok where people say Trump talks like a 16-year-old girl."
He does.
I never heard it before then, but it's so true. It's like, like a basically truthful person, and that nasty woman Kamala Harris, like
he's petty, he's catty, he's overly personal.
It's like, okay,
like,
I do kind of hear that. Yeah. So, but anyway, that was the part I enjoyed. That part I really enjoyed, where Schultz was just like laughing at him for saying he's basically truthful. And then the other part I liked is that Schultz was like, "Hey, so Mike Pence, like."
Well, actually, we have that. So here, let's take a listen.
What about Mike Pence? You got anything for Mike Pence?
Well, it's a shame because he and I had a very good relationship.
Hanging out somewhere.
He couldn't cross the line of doing what was right, in my opinion.
So my question for you is, did Schultz know what he was doing there?
Yes.
Or is he genuinely like, seriously, what happened to him?
No, he knew what he was doing.
He knew what he was doing?
Yeah, he's not a dumb person. Like, yeah, he definitely knew what he was doing with that. Like, hey, that guy Mike Pence, whatever happened with that? And, you know, obviously the Harris campaign then clips in them calling for him to be hung.
Yeah, I showed you the ad. That's the ad that they put together.
That they clipped together. So they found it useful.
But they messed up. They should have put Trump's quote of, he deserves it.
Right.
Because that came out in the Jack Smith indictment. He said that, and then there was one other thing that he said that was like, yeah, fuck him.
Yeah, and listen, this is, you know, I don't really, I don't really agree with the Democrat strategy at this point. I thought when they put Tim Walz on the ticket, they were going to lean into bread and butter economics. I think they should do that. I think that's probably where, you know, whatever small section of voters are still making up their minds, that's probably the type of stuff that they want to hear about. But I think the Democrats' theory is basically like, look, in 2018, 2020, 2022, there was a majority of the country that came together in this like anti-Trump coalition. We believe that that majority is still there, and some of them are Republicans. And the more we talk about like, you know, specific policy things, the more we could potentially alienate them. So we're just doing this generic Democrat, get the old anti-Trump coalition back together. And, you know, this is the sort of thing that plays into that.
To your point, I genuinely don't think Democrats know that when they talk about Democratic policy issues, it's actually really popular and makes them more popular.
I know.
I don't think they know
They're
that.
They're so afraid.
And that's kind of crazy. Yeah, they're so frightened.
There's still this Clinton era hangover of if it's something we support, it must be unpopular.
Right.
And we must like distance ourselves from it. It's like
you
paid family leave and school lunch, all this, the price gouging thing, so popular. And then you just run away from it at like 100 miles per hour.
Because they called you a communist.
Parade around with Liz Cheney and, you know, brag on The View about how you're going to put a Republican in your cabinet. And yeah, I think, you know, listen, not a fan of Liz Cheney. I understand the highlighting of these are Republicans who support us. What I cannot understand is the just total erasing of the very, very popular specific economic program that your vice president enacted, that, you know, your administration pushed, and that you yourself have, you know, support in terms of your campaign. That piece just makes zero sense to me.
All they have to do, it's actually, as goofy as it sounds, the all of the above strategy. So they should still lean into the weird stuff because weird worked really well.
Yeah.
They should still lean into the we're not going back stuff. That worked really well.
Yeah.
I have zero problem with highlighting January 6th stuff and abortion stuff because that worked really well.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's also super important. Just pick out 3 of your popular policies and never shut up about them.
Yeah, that's right.
Talk about, you know, free school breakfast for kids, free school lunch for kids, paid family leave, and paid medical leave. And if every time you do an interview, you say, that's what we're going to get done. We're going to make sure every kid in America at school has free breakfast and free lunch. We're going to make sure that you get 12 weeks paid vacation time or paid sick time because, look, we're overworked, we're overburdened, and every other country has, you know, some amount of time where they have paid time off. And we don't. And we don't. So you're getting screwed. So if they were to do all of those things, she'd win by 10 points.
And then in terms of the contrast, like the messaging about Trump's tariffs being a tax on ordinary people, which is just true.
Yeah, that
I
worked.
mean, it will raise costs. Anyone who's honest looking at this policy will say this will raise costs by thousands of dollars on the ordinary person. Like, you should be hammering the shit out of that because I think it's devastating at a time when inflation and prices are the #1 concern of Americans. And your opponent has gift wrapped to you a plan that will unambiguously raise costs across the board on almost literally everything. To not just like routinely and relentlessly highlight that is political malpractice.
Yeah, that's right.